and it was an alcohol beverage control issue where the manager or the owner did not require the patrons on the inside to have proper ABC credentialing of the cards, and he deposited, or he paid a $250 bond to Recorder's Court, which he forfeited. So those are three convictions right there. Recorder's Court, yes, ma'am.
How many employees was it that didn't have the proper ABC cards?
Tell me again, ma'am.
Do you know how many employees involved not having the proper ABC cards?
I have some convictions here. Let me make sure that I've got my documentation correct before I start reading them. On September the 6th of 14, one of the people inside, employee inside that was working at the time, probably a manager, was charged with not requiring the ABC responsibilities within the club, the cards. She posted a $100 bond and forfeited that in Recorder's Court. On 12/15/14, the individual that was the security person on the outside of the bar, inside of the bar, was a convicted felon. He had a weapon on him at the time, and he also had a quantity of marijuana on him at the time. That case has been bound over to Superior Court for action. On 9/11/15, the individual that was working inside the bar as a disc jockey was found with marijuana in his possession and also no alcohol beverage control card. That case was bound over to state court. Another charge, Maria Jackson, was charged with the ABC employee responsibility, which is not requiring other people in the club to have the alcohol beverage control card. Another employee, Raven McKinney, same charge, ABC employee responsibility, not requiring other individuals inside the business to have an alcohol beverage control card, $250 bond forfeiture to Recorder's Court. And another, Andrea Barksdale, ABC employee responsibility was the charge. She posted a $250 bond to Recorder's Court and forfeited that money. Those are the convictions.
Thank you. And for those listening, I ask these questions because ultimately it is the owner's responsibility that employees that work in that place have a proper whatever is required for that position.
It is the individual that holds the business license, the owner, the proprietor, the manager of that business to have.
And this is not the first. This is not the first club that we looked at ABC requirements and whether or not the employees met them.
Absolutely
We've done
not.
it several
we
times.
do 5 major inspections on every club in this town each year, 5 per year, per club, everything in Columbus.
And also, it's the owner's responsibility to do background checks on anybody they hire.
It is.
All right. Anything else we need to, Council Barnes? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I thought you wanted to use that one. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. Am I correct in hearing that you do have, Mr., another club?
Yes, sir.
Where's Yvonne? Yvonne, at the other club, are there any violations at the other club at all?
I'm sorry.
At the other establishment, any violations at the other one?
As far as club play, there were some violations as far as not paying the alcohol, the mixed drinks exhaust taxes. So when the officer went out there, they also issued a citation for the noncompliance of the payment of the alcohol exhaust tax.
But no instances at the level that we're hearing at the Lux?
Not at the present time, no.
I guess my question, I'm having trouble just reconciling how one place can be without any instance and another place be with all these problems.
Well, I do know.
Which entails not only outside, and my consternation is that it's not only caused by the outsiders, but the non-compliance of the employees, but they're, at the other establishment, you have compliance. I'm struggling with this right now because I'm to be quite honest with you, I encourage entrepreneurship. I encourage that, especially of someone young. I encourage it. And I'm just struggling right now with trying to reconcile why at your other establishment there's no problems, and at this one there's problems.
May I address that?
I'm asking him to address it.
I can speak up and say is one is no problems outside because downtown has a very strong police presence right on the sidewalk. But as far as the ABC violations, you know, we've had way more than 5 checks per year. You know, we get a lot of checks all the time. They come by and they check us out. And all of those instances he named, there were 4 people. There was Raven, there was Maria, Andrea, and there was me. Raven had a valid card. Her card was just misplaced by my manager. You know, it's in the system. Her card was valid. Maria was the only person working without a valid card. My card was valid and my manager's card was valid. They arrested my manager on the same day for ABC responsibility. And then for some reason, 2 weeks later, they contacted me and arrested me for the same charges that my manager had already been arrested for 2 weeks prior. And when they told me I had a warrant, I went down and I turned myself in 2 hours later and I paid my bond and I got out. You know, but I was never notified that I had a chance to go to court and fight my charges or to appeal or say anything about it. You know, that was the only one instance where they came in out of numerous checks since we've been open where somebody was even found working without a permit. We take that very serious. You know, and the one time that the dude, Tyrese Meyer, was outside, he got caught outside before we opened, and he had marijuana, he had a pistol on him. That wasn't permitted by me. That wasn't something that I condoned, and he was fired, you know, that same day as soon as he returned. Yeah, and, you know, he came to me as a recommendation from somebody I met when I first got to Columbus, Mr. Calvis Meyer. That's his son, you know, and through me doing dealings around the way, you know, he was somebody, and his other stepson is a friend of mine, and I brought him on, so I can't speak for why he had a gun or why he had drugs in his car. You know, I don't want to speak for him, but once we found out that was going on, you know, he was immediately dismissed from the business. And, you know, like I said, the excise taxes, Ms. Yvonne can tell you, when I was notified on the 17th, I went down 9 early that morning and I paid my taxes the next day. It was just a slip up by me. It wasn't something that's a continuous problem that I always don't pay my taxes.
Is that true, Yvonne?
We've had numerous occasions in which we've had to send special enforcement to the location for the noncompliance of the mixed drinks excise taxes. So I know there were 4 reporting periods in which we had to send special enforcement, in which the excise taxes were not paid, so they were 2 months in arrears. And Mr. Floyd came in after special enforcement went out there. In addition, there were some other months in which he was late, but he came in probably like a week after before we could send special enforcement out there. But we do notify the businesses by a letter stating that you need to come into compliance before we actually notify special enforcement. So on 4 occasions, we had to send special enforcement regarding the location of Lux Gentlemen's Club.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I did want to hear from him. But you wanted to say something?
The only thing I wanted to address, and Mr. Floyd kind of addressed it, the incident with the ABC card. It was one actual incident on September the 11th, and basically it wasn't multiple people that didn't have cards. It was the one young lady, Maria Jackson, who had an expired card because it went past her birthday. But because she had an expired card, the managers were also arrested. So I just wanted the council to understand it wasn't like there was 4 or 5 people that didn't have ABC cards because it was employee responsibility. It was the managers, as Mayor indicated, and Councilwoman Turner Pugh indicated, it's the manager's responsibility. So they were arrested as well. And for whatever reason, Mr. Floyd was arrested like weeks later. So that's why in your report it says September the 30th. But I want the council to understand the incident came out of one incident on September 11th. So I just wanted the council to understand it's not 2 separate incidents. It's one September 11th. They were just arrested on different dates. And I also just want to address one thing that the Senator Attorney mentioned that the mayor had asked about on Code Section 19-20A. that specific code section. But it requires, and I know it was mentioned about one or more violations, but part of the statute that was left out is that they have to be found guilty of those violations. It's not that the violations occurred, but they have to be found guilty. Now, there's the mayor is a lawyer as well. There's a very big difference between a bond forfeiture and a guilty plea. Now, how we may treat those or think of that as a sign of guilt, but I'm just asking to look at the statute as it was written. It requires a no-low plea or a guilty plea, which none of these have, whether it's Mr. Floyd, Ms. Barksdale, Ms. Jackson, or Ms. McKinney. They are all bond forfeitures, and that's a very unique difference. A bond forfeiture and a guilty plea is something totally separate. Now, I do understand that he did have to pay the fine and was found guilty of the tax, but my understanding is that once he received the notice, and Mr. Floyd can address it himself, he went and paid the taxes and didn't know. He felt, instead of contacting me or another lawyer, felt that once it was paid, there was no need to go to recorder's court. And that's why the contempt was there. But it was paid, so once he did, he paid for the contempt for missing court, and then he paid, I believe he went before Judge Zielinski, is that correct? Yeah. And he paid whatever fine that Judge Zielinski has instituted for missing court that day. But also to answer your question, why it's still, I'm assuming in your mind why the disparity.
You're assuming correctly.
And that's what my point I wanted to get across. You have that police presence downtown. You take one step outside of that club, you're going to see a police officer. If I'm understanding that even the MPs, even the military police, sometimes patrol down there as well to make sure their soldiers are safe and not doing anything wrong. So can you imagine, one, for example, someone that wants to break into a car. He rides downtown, he's on this corner, he sees a police officer. He rides, down on another corner towards the end by Fountain City Coffee and sees another police officer. He's going to go away. But once he goes down Victory Drive, and although you may see officers pass by, but not there on foot within a few hundred feet, he or she may pull into a parking lot, and when the security guard isn't looking, may break into a car or break into a window or pull on the door to see if the car is open. And that is the difference, because you have to ask yourself, why is it? He can be, even though he paid his taxes, maybe not on time as he should, but there's no history of violence in Club Play, but then you have these acts in Club Lux by the same owner. And that is the difference. It's just police presence.
Chief, this question is for you. Has Mr. Floyd sat down and had conversations with you about this problem? Has he spoken to you about addressing what Attorney Jackson has said, or has he been proactive in seeking your advice? Because my concern in this here now is the safety of citizens. I mean, that's my basic concern right now, and it sets up red flags to me, because I don't want any other occurrences of that. Now, has Mr. Floyd taken?
I have two of my officers that are here tonight that actually made those cases. I don't think that everything that you've just heard up here is entirely correct. Just like the statement that was made about the individual and the excise taxes paying it the next day, that is not true. It was not a true statement when it was made. And the individual had to actually have someone to go out there and get a warrant, or there was a warrant obtained, to get the individual to come in and pay it. So this is not totally correct. Now, the Business Improvement District downtown hires 8 officers. Those 8 officers, and it could vary depending on the large events that are outside, not inside on private property. They're out there to maintain control, traffic control, crowd control, whatever, in those areas. They're maintained on an off-duty basis because of the fact that officers, we do not allow them to work inside a bar. They could work at a place that has a restaurant's license where at least 51% of the sales are from food. We will let an officer work only in the parking lot of those areas, but not in a bar. It's a conflict of interest for us to sit there and watch a drunk come out of a bar and leave DUI. That's a conflict anywhere you look at it. Now, on the south end of town, in the area where he's talking about, have the smallest beats, the smallest areas where an officer rides as anywhere in Columbus. There should not be an officer, ever be an officer, unless they're tied up at a club where the shooting's taking place, and those officers are not on the road because they're working those shootings or working an armed robbery or working an area where shots have been fired and that officer's tied up.
So am I understanding you to say, am I correct in saying that there is not an unequal police presence in that area? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
In my opinion, there is not. Now, downtown, on Friday and Saturday nights during large events, the Business Improvement District hire off-duty officers to work outside for outside functions. And that includes the entire area that BID controls in the downtown area.
Okay, to my original question. So did Mr. Floyd verbalize this concern to you? I mean, you know, when you have people shot around your place, did he actually come in? Has he had a conversation with you trying to glean some advice about what could he do proactively to correct the situation?
He has talked to me in the presence of the mayor, in the mayor's office. He's also talked to my vice captain and one of the sergeants that I have sitting here with me tonight. And the sergeant here is the one that made these cases. And we told him the same thing at that time, that we did not allow off-duty officers to just sit in a parking lot or work for an establishment that's a bar. They could work if it's a restaurant where 51% of the sales is from food, but not in a bar. That's a conflict of interest as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. We have Councilor Thomas with further discussion.
I have a question for Mr. Floyd and Mr. Jackson. Mr. Floyd, Mr. Jackson has suggested that one of the alternatives that we may have tonight is to give you a 90-day period in order to see how things go and give you the opportunity to do some of the things that are on this list that you gave to us. And we often have people come before us who are asking for additional time to clean up whatever it is that's going on. I'm thinking when we had demolition folks, they always come and ask this. My question to you is, when were you aware that these kinds of things were going on to the extent that it could mean the revocation of your business license and or your alcohol license? How long have you known this?
Have I known or been notified by the police?
No, not notified by the police. How long have you known that these kinds of things were going on in your establishment or around your establishment?
Since about February, when I requested the meeting with the mayor.
Okay. And one of the things that you have said that you are doing is that you, in September of this year, signed a contract with a licensed security company to augment the security that you have in your parking lot. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And the other, I guess one of my questions too is, what about this organization that you're talking about? How long has that activity been going on? Trying to put that together.
since mid-September, because when we had the initial incidences in February, it really wasn't much going on. Maybe a couple little club fights or something at night, but we weren't having the 2 shootings that happened in February. It wasn't nothing to that extent. And then in September, with violence in the neighborhood spilling over, it was like incidents that was just happening back to back to back. And, we just tried to get real proactive and just eliminate everything. We increased our security after February. We changed the way we did the parking lot, and we increased it, and we made improvements. But in September, it kind of returned, and things were going crazy. So now it was just like, we just got to do something above and beyond to help the safety of everybody on Victory Drive. Because I'm not just concerned about my club. I used to visit all those other clubs as a customer before I became my own business owner. And I just think it'll benefit everybody. I'm somebody that's for the community, and I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
So are you saying that basically between February and September, things were pretty quiet?
We might have had a few little incidents, but it wasn't nothing, we didn't have anything major going on out there.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Chief, did you want to?
I've got one other statement to make. And again, I don't think that you're hearing all the truth up here tonight. We did have a meeting in February, and then it goes on into September, and nothing was done at that time. I don't have a reason to believe it'll be done now. I think that what's happened now is that he's now been brought in front of council, and the reality has set in. There's a difference between Club Play and Club Lux. Club Lux will allow dancers, strippers inside that. That is not allowed downtown at the Play. In my opinion, that is a reason that you don't have the same problems going on the inside of that club, Club Play, as you do on Victory Drive at the Club Lux. It's a different atmosphere, totally different atmosphere.
Okay. All right. Anything further? We still at this point do not have a motion on the floor, and so what I'll do is call them one at a time. First, I'll call to see if there is a motion to revoke the alcohol license of Club Lux, or the Lux Gentlemen's Club. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, you've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion regarding the revocation of the alcohol license? Seeing that there's none, I guess we can go ahead and cue it. Can you cue it for that particular vote, for electronic vote? Okay. And you can record your vote electronically. Okay. And the license, the alcohol license is revoked. Let's move now to the request for the revocation of the business license at 3742 Victory Drive, the Lux Gentlemen's Club. Is there a motion?
Move to revoke.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Okay. Can we cue this as a separate item? Yes, okay. All right, and it is queued to vote. You can record your votes electronically. Okay. And the business license is revoked. All right. Let's see, Mr. Fay.
Okay. Under the ordinances that regulate these alcohol licenses, Mr. Jackson, your client needs to turn in the alcohol and the business license to Ms. Ivy. They are revoked effective immediately, but he still needs to surrender those to Ms. Ivy, and that concludes this hearing.
All right, thank you. We will move on then to our next item. We actually have a request to move an item up from the city manager's agenda due to the fact that there are folks here from out of town who must travel this evening. We do expect, to have a late meeting, obviously, and so we're trying to accommodate that request. We will ask, though, that it's an important issue, but please do be as brief as possible. So we're going to call forward at this time Kim Blakely, Mr. Robert Anderson, and Mr. Richard Bishop to hear an and I forget that it's on the city manager's agenda, but I'm going to turn it over to the city manager. This is an item being pulled up from the city manager's agenda. Sorry about that.
No problem, Madam Mayor. I was just, Judge Mark D'Antonio was here, and
That's an item we're going to take up on the city attorney's agenda. He had to leave, and there's some discussion, so we're going to do that on the city attorney's agenda.
thank you, Madam Mayor. We have Mr. Ken Blakely here, and to provide an update on redevelopment districts. Many of those watching by television or here present today will know it as tax allocation districts, but redevelopment powers, redevelopment districts. He has actually been working with a number of organizations, and we've got President and CEO of Uptown Columbus here. We've got Mr. Robert Anderson here with the Liberty Theater, and Marquette McKnight, I don't think could be here tonight, but a number of people who have been working with him on some redevelopment districts. And so with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Ken Blakely to go ahead and tell you why he's here and share with you the information he's brought with him. Mr. Ken Blakely.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Glad to be here, Mayor, council members. My name is Ken Blakely. We have been working with Uptown over the last several months, working on putting together a tax allocation redevelopment plan for an area we're going to talk about tonight. And as you know, about a year ago, the voters here in the city approved the right to form tax allocation districts. And that process involves, once that approval's been done, that either the city or neighborhoods or areas interested in redevelopment plans put together a preliminary plan and bring that to you, submit that to the city for your review and determination of whether you want to set up that as a tax allocation district. Where we are in the process, just to give you an update, is we are in the process of actually preparing the redevelopment plan. We hope to have a draft plan submitted to the city within about 10 days. And what I'm going to do just briefly tonight is take you through what's the idea behind this plan and certainly answer any questions that you have. As you know, tax allocation districts are something the state has permitted since 1985, and the voters here in Columbus approved a year ago the consideration of tax allocation districts. And basically the concept's a pretty simple one, has a lot of little details, but it's a fairly simple idea. You establish an area, you freeze the tax base in that area. All the taxes collected for the county and schools continue to go to those jurisdictions, but any incremental value that's created, any new value, it goes into a special fund that can be used to reinvest back into those areas. And it does not, it only impacts ad valorem taxes, it doesn't affect personal property or eSPLOST funds during that period. TADs have been used in our state pretty actively since 1999. Probably the big example everybody always points to is on the left there, Atlantic Station. If you look at that upper picture, the decks that you see basically were funded by the tax allocation district for Atlantic Station, and when those decks were in place, about 11,000 spaces, that basically was the infrastructure needed to trigger the development above. And if any of you have been there, you know it's a very active development that has residential, retail components, and office component. On the upper right is another example of how TADs have been used. The old Fourth Ward Park in the city of Atlanta, which is next to the old, City Hall East, a major park facility, basically a water retention facility, was created along the Atlanta Beltline, and that was funded in part using tax allocation district funds. And it's become one of the major gathering places along the Beltline, as somebody has said, one of the crown jewels of the Beltline itself. And the World of Coca-Cola, which is downtown and adjacent to Centennial Park, also received some TAD funding support to create the new World of Coke a couple of years ago. So those are just some examples. Probably one that I always like to highlight is East Point. You can see in that picture in 2002, there's a property right near the Atlanta airport, right on 285 and Camp Creek Parkway, and the comment was no one had across that property since the Cherokees had been sitting there for years because it had a lot of rock and it had a lot of soil conditions, didn't have any infrastructure. And the city entered into an agreement to create a tax allocation district in that area in 2002. And at that time, there was basically no development in that area. And since that time, there's been over 1.5 million square feet of retail, about 2,000 residential units, and about 4 million square feet of business park and industrial space created, all as a result of the TAD basically doing the site preparation work and putting a $48 million sewer line through the area, basically opening the area up to development. Once those infrastructure pieces were in place, then the economics of the project worked, and they had interest from Duke Realty and from North American Properties and several home builders, apartment developers in that area. If you look at values in that area, it was $4 million when the TAD was created, which is the blue line. And if that grew at 4% a year over the last 15 years, today would be worth about $7 million. That's about a 1.75 times growth. That would just be kind of the normal growth in the area. But with the TAD, the assessed value, which is that orange line, grew from $4 million to $89 million in that 12-year period. So today, values in that area are 22 times higher than they were when they started the TAD process. So I think it's a great example, kind of shows the power of how this incentive can work. Here in Columbus, the city's digest has been growing at about a 2% clip, a little less than 2% over the last 5 years. And so that is great because we certainly had the recession occurred during that period and had an impact on everybody's tax digest, but it's been kind of growing modestly during that period. What we're trying to do with this TAD is to accelerate that pace of growth. One of the questions we've had is, doesn't the area have to be blighted to qualify for a TAD? You know, if you're going to set one up. In reality, that's only one of 3 definitions that the state requires. One is that the area, if it is blighted or distressed, that clearly qualifies as a potential TAD area. But the other 2 are what are called deteriorating or underinvested areas, and the third is an area that lacks adequate infrastructure. So if you have an area of the city that has either of those 3 criteria, it can be eligible for a TAD. And I would say today the most common 2 that we see are deteriorating or underinvested areas and areas that lack adequate infrastructure to allow for development. Those have been the most common in the recent TADs. We're here to talk tonight about, I think, a really exciting proposal, which we're calling the River District area, which is to create a redevelopment plan that would include 3 TAD properties, and it would basically include on the south side the 6th Avenue and Liberty District zone, in the middle the Uptown area, and on the north side 2nd Avenue and City Village. All 3 of these TADs would be in one large redevelopment area, which has about 850 acres of property in those areas. Let's talk about each one. And within that redevelopment area, we'd have 3 separate TADs. The first one is the 6th Avenue and Liberty District, which you see here in blue. Basically runs from 18th Street on the north to the river on the south. Western boundary is 3rd Avenue and Veterans Parkway, and the eastern boundary is the railroad line and 10th Avenue. That area's got about 275 acres. About 20% of the land in there is tax exempt. It's owned by public entities. And it has a taxable value today of $26 million. It represents about 0.6% of the city's tax digest, and that's important. I'll explain as we go through this. The second TAD would be the Uptown TAD. It would be about 195 acres, the area you see outlined in orange on the map, basically from the river across to 3rd Avenue or Veterans Parkway, and then 8th and 6th Street on the south and 14th Street on the north. It has a current taxable value of about $48 million. It also has about 20% of all the properties are exempt because they're church properties or governmental entities that are in the area. And it represents about just a hair over 1% of the city's total tax digest. One of the things we've heard about Uptown is, well, Uptown's already got a lot of momentum. Is there really a need to have a TAD in the Uptown area? And I could show you just this map. This is kind of a very preliminary look at this point, but Those areas in green we've already identified as underutilized or underdeveloped areas that are in Uptown. So there's about 25 acres of property in Uptown that looks to us could use the TAD. Doesn't mean they all would use it, but it certainly would be a vehicle to improve that area and sort of sustain the momentum that Uptown is starting to get. The third area would be the 2nd Avenue City Village area, which is basically the area north of Uptown along the river edge. And, whoop, we lost it there. You still got it there? Okay. And that area is, this would be the biggest of the 3 TADs. It's about 350 acres. There we go. 350 acres. It has a it has a taxable value of about $30 million, and it represents about 0.7% of the city's tax digest, a little less than 0.75% of the tax digest. Its northern boundary would be Manchester Expressway. The western boundary is the river. Southern boundary is 14th Street, and the eastern boundary is either 3rd Avenue or Veterans Parkway. So again, the goal is to combine all 3 of those areas into a TAD. Now, we talked about that percentage. If you add the 3 proposed TADs together, they represent 2.4% of the city's tax digest. So if I take those 3 TADs and collectively, the state law limits the city and county to having no more than 10% of your digest in all TADs collectively. So you would still have 7.6% left margin to do additional TADs in other locations around the city if you deem that you want to do those. So relatively, given how big this area is, that's a pretty modest percentage. Around the state, there's only one city. Atlanta is the only city that's reached the 10% limit. Most of the cities are in the 5, 6, 7% range, but Atlanta is the only one, again, that has gone to the full 10%. When we look at the 3 TADs together, it's a pretty amazing plan that's been proposed. When you add the potential development in all 3 TADs together, it's just short of $500 million of potential projects that could be developing in those 3 areas over, say, the next 5 to 10 year period. Roughly, that's about 11-12% of your total tax digest you would be adding through the development that would occur in these areas. And we estimate that if that level of development occurs, it would generate about $60 million in TAD proceeds that you could use to reinvest in those areas. And of course, any of that reinvestment is subject to your approval as those projects come through and seek funding from the city at some future time. But a very significant level of potential development. How we came up with those estimates, we've been working with each of the groups in the 3 areas to try to identify what kinds of projects they have either in the development pipeline or in their master plans. And in the Liberty District 6th Avenue area, there's a number of projects that are listed there. Collectively, it's about 500 units of residential, 15,000 feet of office, 70,000 feet of hotel, and about 150 hotel rooms. So we use those planned projects to estimate what the potential value could be. Now, we don't know the exact schedule when they happen or exactly when they occur, but again, those would be ones that kind of really hypothetical examples. In the Uptown area, we had a number of projects that were identified. One was Rivers Landing, the Raymond Road development, a new convention hotel, and actually several other hotel properties. Combined, almost 400 units of housing, 50,000 feet of office, about 100,000 feet of new retail, and about 600 hotel rooms. Collectively, that's about $170 million of investment, additional investment that would go on in the Uptown area, and that would throw off about $24 million of TAD potential. And then the newest plan is in the City Village area, working with the folks who've been doing the master plan in that area. They identified a number of projects that they're considering. One is Phase 2 of the TSIS project, the redevelopment of City Mills, the Bradley Circle Village project, and Johnson Mill. Added together, those are about 500 residential units, a little over 600,000 feet of office, and about 85,000 feet of retail. Altogether, that would have an estimated value of about $190 million and would support about $20 million in TAD proceeds. So again, those are all part of that $500 million. So in summary, if the council's decision was to approve the 3 TADs for the River District, we estimate the potential induced investment that would occur would be just short of $500 million. That would add about $190 million of tax digest to the city and would support about $60 million in potential TAD funding if you decided to provide that funding. If you look at it from a private investment to TAD perspective, that means for every dollar of TAD that the city would commit, there would be $8 of private investment committed to the various projects over that time period. How would this process move forward? Again, as I mentioned, we're really on that third box there. We're in the process right now of putting together the redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan is sort of the business plan that would govern the district, and we will be submitting that to the city for your consideration and review. And if the city, upon your review, decide to have a public hearing, you could then adopt that redevelopment plan. That would effectively create the River District TADs. And then at that point, we would begin our discussion with the school board and try to get them to concur to pledge their revenue as well to the plan. Once that's been accomplished, we then would establish the district, and that's done through the State Department of Revenue. Basically, they certify the tax base of the district. Also wanted to mention there's a second TAD area that we are looking at around Southeast Columbus and the Fort Benning area. We're not ready to bring that forward, but I would say you're getting a lot of interest and activity in about a year from the approval of this, which I would be very encouraged based on all the activity that we're seeing on the TAD front. With that, I'll open up to any questions or comments.
Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor and Council, I want to thank Mr. Blakely for coming tonight to share with you what he has been working on with some community organizations and community people. We'd like to email you his PowerPoint. We don't have a copy tonight, but we'd like to email it to you, and then we would like to ask Mr. Blakely and some of the community people he's been working with to make themselves available to answer questions that you may have over the next couple of weeks. We'd like to bring back to you on a first reading, which would be considered a public hearing, excuse me, in November, the second Tuesday in November, a first reading that would ask you to have a public hearing, hear from the community and others on these three redevelopment districts or tax allocation districts, and then a second reading, the first business meeting thereafter. But we'd like to email it to you and then let you send questions, ask that Mr. Blakely and others make themselves available to meet with you one-on-one or however you'd like to meet to answer any questions. But we'd like to bring it back to you on first reading the second Tuesday in November. And so with that, he can answer any questions.
We have a couple, and also I think it would be good if Mr. Blakely doesn't mind, if you could include a number where the counselors can reach him and an email address. Since this is our first time we'll be asked to do this, I think counselors should be able to contact you directly. I know you've been involved in this for a long time, but I think sometimes you just want to have a personal conversation with somebody about some basic questions you have, and then of course there'll be plenty of public hearings where people can have a thorough vetting of all the issues, but I would bet there will be some detailed questions, as this is just our first time to really bat this around. So with that, we have Councilor Woodson.
Yes, City Manager, if it's possible, as a referral, I would like for us to go ahead and put this also on our website, so people listening in today from the public that feel it might affect them, be able to put in comments or send comments, have an email address where comments can be sent, a phone number that they can meet with Mr. Kent to discuss what concerns they might have. This way, if there are questions that we can't answer, the public has an option to contact Ken and let him explain it a little bit more detailed.
We'll certainly put it on the website, and then we can also capture his update tonight, pull it out of the council meeting video and do a link that they could go and view this, and then, of course, send any questions to us.
And my reason for saying that is because in all three areas, there's development going on or wish list and ideas of things that should happen. So some of those individuals that had input or had some thoughts or have property there can get a better understanding of what's going on. So at the first reading, they don't feel like they were left out of the process. To me, it's just outlining an area. It doesn't say what's going to happen there. It's just outlining an area that can be part of the TAD. It's not saying we're going to build this, that, and this and that in that community. It's not saying that. It's just saying from this area to this area here and this area to this area is the tax allocation. Just like we designed Midland. Midland said they're from here to here. Same way as Uptown from here to here, and then everything else involved in it.
All right,
Glad to.
we have Councilor Thomas.
I want to start off by saying that when we first started talking about TADs, I was firmly in favor of doing this, and I still am. I am somewhat concerned at what is happening at this point, since this is the first, as the mayor said, this is the first time we've been talking about TADs as a council, and we have little or no information from anyone about what's going on here. I don't know who, if you look at your PowerPoint presentation, somebody, and I don't know who, determined the boundaries of the TADs. I don't know who did that. I don't know why that was done. I don't know how that was done. We've not had any conversation about that. Nothing. I know that when we were looking at putting the TAD on the ballot and we voted on that, Mr. Blakely was very helpful to us. I'm curious as to, quite frankly, who's paying your salary at this point? Is the city paying?
No, we're working for Uptown.
You're working for Uptown?
Yes, we've been engaged by Uptown.
Okay. I do think that one of the things that Councilor Woodson said, I have a question about. She said that in what you have shown us, there's nothing that says this is what we're going to build.
Yes.
You said that one of these, I think it was the Uptown, and since I don't have a copy of your PowerPoint, I can't look back to figure it out, but one of the things in Uptown was 650 hotel rooms. Well, that's pretty specific as to what somebody's going to build or wants to build in Uptown. I'm just really, quite frankly, Mr. City Manager and Mayor, very disappointed that we have not had any information on this, and all of a sudden, in 2 weeks, you want us to vote on this. I'm real concerned about that. And I want to say again, I am in favor of TADs. I think they work. I think they do a good job. But quite frankly, when we were talking about TADs and what was going on the ballot, the Liberty District was a district that we talked about quite often, that would make a good TAD, and we need to take a look at that, and that was one of the areas. The Bibb City area was another one that, when we were talking about it, that was one of the places that we were talking about. We never talked about Uptown, and I'm not saying that Uptown is not eligible for a TAD and should not be considered for a TAD, but quite frankly, I have no idea where in Uptown you're talking about. You showed us a map with some green places on there, but I don't know where that is. I mean, if you had given me a copy of that map, I could figure out what you're talking about, but I can't do that tonight. And so I am very much opposed to our making haste in this very first TAD that we do. I want us to do this TAD correctly, and I want us to do this TAD to the best advantage of the city and of the private partnerships that are involved in the TAD. And I think by bringing this back to us in 2 weeks' time is not enough study time, particularly when we have nothing at this point. And I will end by saying I am in favor of TADs. I want you to, I don't want that to be lost in this conversation. I am in favor of TADs, and I think that they will work. I think they will be good for the city. I'm just not there yet.
Appreciate it.
Sure. Let me respond first. I know Councilor Thomas said she was disappointed in the city manager and myself for springing this on council, and that's not really the way it works. What has happened is that the stakeholders have gotten together and hired Mr. Blakely, which we appreciate them getting together on their own. I don't know, but certainly Richard Bishop can speak to the deal, but what little I know of it is that they got together with some other stakeholders they felt were in close proximity and had shared interests, and I think at one point talked about one big TAD district, and I think because of the distribution of resources, Uptown offered to pay the freight for the others, but they can speak to that. We were contacted as the city along the way. This process was going on, to my knowledge, with no real sense of urgency until such time as I think the stakeholders realized that if they're not approved by December 31, then they must wait until 2017. And that's a decision for council, certainly. But they see an opportunity to miss 12 months of potential projects, and that's something for city to weigh. So I'll let them speak for themselves, but when they came and asked to be on the agenda tonight for an update to council, what was conveyed to me was that they wanted to have this considered before December 31 because the law states that if the TAD boundaries, no projects, but if the town boundaries are not set by December 31, then you must wait till December 31 of the next year. And so I think that there's been some issue with the stakeholders wanting to have the boundaries approved, and they can speak for themselves. I'm not here to carry their water. Did you want to respond to that and then have Richard speak to it?
And the mayor recapped it very well. Uptown sees an opportunity for growth, not just in Uptown, but how the Liberty District and the 6th Avenue corridor and what City Village can do to all of the area that we're talking about and what you saw today. And I certainly don't want anybody making a decision and not have enough time to review what you need to review. So I think we're very willing to sit down with each one of you and talk about the districts, as how the districts were drawn. We engaged Historic Columbus and Justin and all those folks that have been involved in City Village from the beginning. We included Councilor Woodson in the process with her district in that area that's the 6th Avenue, the Liberty District area. We had meetings that she was involved in. So it's just an ongoing process that we think is important, not just for Uptown. And we think Uptown absolutely needs to be a part of the TAD. There's still blighted areas in our definition of Uptown. You know, we talk about Uptown all the time. It's a journey, not a destination. There's always going to be things that need to be done in Uptown. And I think we've all seen some successes there, but it's just the beginning. We are not anywhere near where we need to be in Uptown. But not only that, we feel like joining these other two districts together just makes good sense. We believe that synergy there that will be created by those three districts is good for Uptown and it's good for the other two. And we are paying for it. We think it's that important to get this council to approve it in this process that we're willing to go through. And we think the review of it is very important, and that's why we're here today. But at the end of the day, even when these districts are approved, nothing gets finalized until this council approves it. You know, if it gets approved this year or next year, any project that comes forward, you have the final say on it. But there's opportunities there this next year. John Teeples is in the audience. John is working on a project right now that's right in the middle of Uptown that is critical to Uptown. And a TAD would be a great enhancement for his project. So these are just good projects, and we certainly understand that you want to do your due diligence. We want to do it right, just as you do. But we think we've got time between now and the end of the year to get it done, and we hope we can have your support as we move forward in this process. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, if I may say to the council, these redevelopment districts or TADs are not driven by staff. They're driven by organizations, they're driven by developers, those who have an interest in improving a particular area. And so staff is there to assist and help facilitate. These organizations came together and they put the money on the table to hire the professional to do the work that they've done, and we're simply there to facilitate, and we will be guided by the council, but it's not driven by staff. It's driven by organizations like Uptown and Liberty, and staff will support.
There actually was another, just so everyone knows, and I don't know what the presumption was, but there actually was another TAD that I would have presumed that would have been, quote, first, because right after the passage, the Fort Benning Tech Park began working immediately almost on a TAD. And my understanding is, though I'm not directly involved, that they're working with their city councilor of that particular district. And he's not here this evening to speak to it, but I believe they're meeting with him and chatting with him. And so I'm sure you'll be hearing about that soon. Why it didn't make it before this did, I can't speak to that, but I'm sure they could answer questions when they come. I get the feeling they're just working through the process. So in any event, we'll continue on with the discussion. Councilor Davis.
Well, and look, I agree with Councilor Thomas, and I think this is, Mr. City Manager, when you say it's driven by developers, that doesn't strike me too good. I'm a developer, and I'm looking for any advantage I can get too. The question here is what we're trying to accomplish, and I have to believe that, with all due respect to the parties here, that the administration knew about this. But what my concern is, we're all responsible for the welfare of the city of Columbus. And we've got a lot of projects moving right now. The mayor's got a proposal on the table. There's plenty of other tools that we've added to, redevelopment tools that we've added to our war chest lately that we can offer developers. But we've got a lot of things going on, and we've got a lot of counter activities as well going on, especially in the Uptown area where a lot of land is coming off the tax rolls for various reasons, but at the same time, we're not replacing it. But we've invested a tremendous amount of money to get development and to start development in that area, and we do have a tremendous amount of momentum going in that area. I also, it kind of somewhat strikes me as an infill project when we really look at it from that standpoint. And then we all know from a standpoint of land, I mean, who we're dealing with. And one of the things I'm concerned about is we're biting off a pretty big chunk here in a short amount of time. And I think I was the first one that brought it up about City Village, which Bibb City would be a great place for a TAD. And that led to one thing, and the next thing we got a master plan, and we're moving forward there. I also thought South Columbus would be great. I thought Midtown would be great in areas of Midtown, but we're biting off a big chunk here that we need to really, I think it's imperative that this council, your timeline, this is the first time I've heard about it. I haven't heard anything in the community about this just until today. Of course, I've been out of the country, but I haven't heard anything. The first thing that comes to my mind is I really got a grasp, and I look forward, Mayor, to talking to Mr. Blakely. I'm having, as a developer, had a really hard time grasping your numbers. It's a pretty serious, grandiose plan, and a lot of it's speculation. I think you would agree with me. At the end of the day, could it be this? Maybe, but I wouldn't bet money on it. That's a long, long ways away in what you were projecting, but I want to understand how it's going to affect the city and where we're at, because we're looking at it from a budgetary standpoint and being able to run the city. And if we're just giving away, and giving away, large areas that are already moving forward from a development standpoint, we may be shooting ourselves in the foot. So, I mean, I want to take the time to slow down and look at that and understand it. I think that's my responsibility, but at the same time, I agree we need to do whatever we can to keep moving development forward and helping folks. The other thing that I want to make sure of, and this is the other side, last time you were here, I asked you this question, you agree with me 100%. We did talk about, Mayor, originally with these TADs, we talked about that when we passed this, that the council was going to get together, go back and check the records. Our conversations were that we were going to get together and council was going to sit down and determine the areas of where we need to put TADs. Nothing was talked about that all of a sudden that private